Hello guys, and welcome to another market review. We're gonna kick off by looking at the Euro USD. If you remember last week's review, we were bearish on Euro because the market retraced this whole leg and was trading below the monthly open. It didn't bounce significantly from the monthly open, and it also rejected clearly from this level here, which we interpreted as a pivot. And the reason why I was seeing that level as a pivot was because the market told us so, right? We have support here, support, resistance, and support. So you see how it was flipped, right? And here we had that clear reaction from the market. We were, however, very skeptical about getting short around here, right? Because we had just tapped into this zone here, which was the range that made the low of the month and created this leg higher. So the risk to reward just wasn't there to get short, either below the weekly open or the monthly open. It just didn't make any sense, right? Moreover, we were saying that the only short worth taking was a run of the Friday's high, right? So we were expecting to see this high get taken, and on a close below, then we would have confirmation in our idea. However, when you take a look at the price action from Monday, you see that we didn't run that high, and we still retraced into the weekly open. When you look at the H4, we didn't have a single close below the weekly open once we reclaimed it, right? So that already made me reduce the probability of success on the short, right? Because now we've had 1, 2, and 3 attempts at flipping this zone, right? And we haven't had a proper stop run into this inefficient move and close below, right? So because we've had 3 attempts in a row, something is telling me that the 4th attempt is gonna make this level break, right? So however, I stick to my plan, and I had one limit here, another one here, and another one here. So when the time comes and price comes into this level, I get filled, right? However, I spoke about the short idea had a stop loss at this high, right? But the moment we get a H4 close above this level here, I'd be out of that position, right? So that was what happened on Tuesday. And that was the moment I got out of that position, and I understood that it was time to flip my bias, right? Because this level, which was acting as resistance very cleanly, has now probably on a retest, right, from above, should hold as support, right? And we've also flipped the weekly open. We haven't had a single close below. So now you have every reason to just get long on retests of this area here, right? And your hard stop loss would be around here, right? But you would get out on a H4 close below this level. which never happened, right? So you see how Friday's high on a retest was a perfect entry. However, the market retraced deeper, but still, this level held brilliantly. And we had a weekly expansion of 110 pips, right, into Thursday. So this flipped our bias. Now, when we look at the daily time frame, we've retested this level and it's held at support, right? It's very, very clean how we flipped this level. And on Friday, we had a deep pullback, which filled some of the inefficient move from Wednesday, right? On the hourly, you can see this more clearly. So because we've already retested this level, right? Sorry, this level here, and Friday's candle nearly filled all of this move. I'm thinking that, you know, the momentum is to the upside as long as we hold above this level, right? Which is our pivot. So what I think is going to happen is that the euro is going to rally early next week. However, it's very close to a resistance level, which is the mid-range, right? So on the hourly, next week we're going to have, on Monday we're going to have a new weekly and monthly open for December. So what I think is most likely, and I would like to play, the way I like to play this would be like to see prices dip, right? Make a dip and see recover the weekly and monthly open, right? And get long on a retest, right? And assume that this low is gonna hold. That would be my hard stop loss. But I would get out on a H4 close below the new weekly and monthly open. And my target for this would only be around here, right? I think this is a target that's gonna be met, and it's very likely because we had a strong sell-off, right? So this move here is inefficient, and that increases the likelihood that we trade there. So I'm thinking this is the way I want to get long on the euro next week. Now, what happens when price comes here? Well, I would expect that at least it will retrace a bit, right? But then I don't know if it's gonna retrace all the way lower and then this holds and we bounce back. I don't know. In previous streams, I've mentioned that we still have a gap unfilled around here, right? This is why sometimes I've been leaning bullish on the possibility that we would trade up here in order to fill this gap. So that's a possibility. I think there's downward pressure on the dollar when you observe how also all the precious metals are trading. They're really bullish, and we're going to cover some of them um, soon. But one of the triggers I had a few weeks back would be to just simply wait for H4 or a reclaim of this mid-range, right? And then you could get long. So maybe, you know, if next week is going to be bullish on the euro, you can trade here. Maybe price cools off and then it reclaims and we start trading higher. However, if something like this happened, well, it would be a bit greedy, because normally it's not been moving that much, but it could happen, right? 140 pips could totally happen, but we'll see, right? The main play is just simply to get long on the first days of the week. Once we've made a low and we are closing above the weekly open, and it's a level that holds, right? But on based on the daily time frame structure, right? I'm thinking that if we're bullish, we shouldn't trade below this low, right? So if we traded below this low, I would need to reassess and invalidate my idea. But I'm thinking this structure should hold, right? And we should make a low and make a higher around here, right? Excuse me for my drawing, but yeah, you get the idea, right? So that's Euro USD covered. Um, I'm thinking very similar on GBP. Somehow it was more bullish than Euro last week. I'm also expecting that this should go higher. I'm thinking, yeah, that around here is a magnet for price. Also very inefficient sell-off, and I wish to buy a dip earlier in the week, right? Because I think just the momentum is there, and if even GBP is rallying, then I think the dollar is screwed. Right, so I wanted to cover uh, gold now. Yeah, let's jump into gold because it did something very interesting last week, right? So I think on daily time frame you'll see, right? So around here you see how this weekly open kept kept the price of gold below this line, and on the weekly open we had a strong move up, and then price, I was expecting price to roll over from this trend line, right? To see it act as resistance. However, when you see what price did once it reached that level, was it just simply formed a range, and you see it make high highs and higher lows and lower highs in this sort of compression, instead of just rolling over and making and breaking the structure. It didn't. And you see how on Friday it broke above and it retested the daily open on Friday and this trend line, and then it just started making new highs. And this is kind of surprising, really, that even on a Friday and the last trading hour of the week, it kept going higher. So when you look at the daily time frame, this is not something to ignore, right? I think this strength should carry on the next week, especially because when you see the pattern that is being drawn here, um, you normally don't see this retrace into the trend line, right? And then keep bouncing. You normally see this just keep going higher, higher and higher until it starts distributing, right? And it rolls over. And then this trend line doesn't hold and it retraces the whole thing. So I'm expecting something like this, really. And the question is, how do you get on board on this trade? Well, because we've already retested the trend line after breaking out, right? You really shouldn't come here again, right? You really shouldn't. So that is one of my ideas for hard stop losses. If you do something like this and you put your TP around the all-time highs, you get a decent risk to reward. So this is one play, and I'm willing to take this with smaller size because the risk to reward is not that great. However, the way I would add another position with conviction and more size would be to simply wait for the new weekly open, right? Let's wait for the new weekly open. Let's 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 give gold some time. Let's hope it makes a low, and on a reclaim, you just get long. Assume that this is the low of the week, right? I would keep a hard stop loss around here still, and see how price behaves. But once it makes a low, that's sufficient. Assume that it's just gonna keep trading higher if it reclaims the weekly open, right? So I'm willing to take this risk, and I'm really looking forward to trading gold. Yeah. So now let's look at EURUSD. It's been a while since we've talked about this one because I anticipated that it was just going to be in the mid-range, right? And I didn't see any play worth paying attention, and I think I was right to do so. However, it is now getting closer to one of our areas of interest, right? So it's been stuck in this range, and the only place I've entertained were longing around here and shorting around here. So because we've already had like 3 significant swing lows made on this zone, I'm thinking that the momentum on the EURUSD is to the downside based on this price action, and this is not gonna hold, right? And it's gonna trade a bit lower, right? So this green box is significant. Why? Well, because this was the origin of this whole move, right? And it isn't tapped, and this whole zone here, right? Whenever we've seen price come into it, we've seen price bounce, right? So I'm expecting similar behavior, right? I don't think a dip on this line here is worth buying. I think a dip into this zone is worth buying, right? And then just hold it like a champ, and I'm pretty positive that you at least get around a 200 pip bounce, at least into this level, right? I'd be very, very surprised if this box here doesn't hold, right? And I think there's a very, very decent risk to reward in taking a long here. Yeah, it's around 2R, right? And you can get more size once you see some sort of, price action that confirms that we're going higher from here. But this is one of my preferred long scenarios. The other one would be, it's very, very far away, but if by some chance we come into this zone here, I think this is a blind long. This is a zone, a demand zone that's untapped, and we've not traded there. So very, very likely that price would offer a significant bounce, like around 5 to 600 pips from here. But yeah, so now let's cover Euro New Zealand, right? And because last week, sorry, we were bearish, right? And it run the previous high, And look what it did. And it went into our TP. We said if the momentum picked up, that this low was going to be taken, because this whole move up was very inefficient. We just needed a proper swing high to be put in order to retrace this move, right? So we are also mentioning how New Zealand dollar has been very, very one-sided, right? Everyone's been selling the New Zealand dollar all year, and it was just sitting at massive support zones against the United States dollar, and you know, against the Australian dollar as well. And you know, it was at resistance. The Euro New Zealand was at resistance, so it was very, very easy, uh, very, very easy trade to see coming. So I don't know if this is the high of the year on Euro New Zealand, and now it makes more sense to trade the shorts. I think that I actually think that we are not going to see this again, right? I think that you want to get short on Euro New Zealand because we also have this inefficient move to the upside. So this shit could happen in December. It could very well happen. So we're gonna have a new monthly open around here and a new weekly open, right? I would love to see bearish price action around here, right? And be able to fade it, and once it gets below, have another reason to short into these lows here. They seem very, very clean for the taking, and we also have like this move was kind of explosive, in my opinion. So I think that it makes more sense to look for shorts on Euro New Zealand now. The positioning is also like very, very one-sided, and yeah, we could get decent bounces from here, but I think the high of the year is very, very much likely in with this. And I don't know if this, yeah, I wanted to cover New Zealand USD, right? This is what I mentioned. You see this sitting at the yearly open, right? It should hold. And last week we had a weekly SFP. We traded below the yearly open and we closed above. And when this week started, we traded it and we closed above the weekly open. And look what happened next, right? So I think that I'm not calling for a massive trend to take place now, because well, we are in December and I don't know how much the market wants to move now at this point. However, this strength shown in the New Zealand dollar should carry on at least a bit during December, because it moved so much last week. I'm expecting that maybe Monday or Tuesday prices ranges a bit, and I would just love to see it just make a low around here, just chop people and make a low, reclaim the weekly open, and then continue making new highs, right? At least into this zone here. I would love to see that. So let's see if that happens. Now I wanted to take a final look at the dollar index because from my view, it just looks like it wants to roll over and start trading lower. But you know, we really need to see how price develops next week. I think it's going to give us confirmation because we've seen this trend line hold price on the daily time frame, and you know, next week we should have a resolution on this trend line, and we either see, you know, dollar reclaim this level and hold, or we see it break below, and that would impact our bias for the rest of the month. So I think there are some good opportunities next week. However, I'm not so willingly to put a lot of size behind my trades because I think that waiting for the next for the first week of the month to give some to give some clarity on these ideas would pay off, right? And we can put more size in on the second and third week of the month. But definitely, I will be trading next week, and I'll just, you know, keep my risk tighter. So that was everything for this week. See you guys next week.